Imagine your baby in the palm of your hands passing out. It was hands down the scariest moment of my life. I called 911.
It's been a few days. We haven't posted a video for a couple days because, as some of you guys have probably figured out by now through watching our Instagram stories and some of our posts, is that last week on Wednesday night, Jensen had a very severe choking incident that required CPR from Derek. We weren't filming, and obviously we weren't filming when that happened. And we started kind of filming bits and pieces, like when we got to the hospital and our experience there, but then we realized we never said what happened.
Yeah.
So
for those of you that don't follow us on Instagram and don't know what happened, you would watch that and just not even know what's going on.
And even really on Instagram, we didn't explain. We kind of gave an overview, but we didn't really explain what happened.
The magnitude of it.
Yeah. So, and I think the main reason why we haven't really done this yet is, for one, that was a very traumatic event. We've been through things like this with him before, but it doesn't get easier. And in fact, I think in some ways it gets harder because you're carrying this baggage from these other times that you feel like you've almost lost your child. So we needed a couple days to process our thoughts and our experiences, and really even with Derek, because he was home with the kids and everything that happened, he's needed a few days to really even piece it together. So we're just going to take a minute and tell you guys exactly talk you through the night until we were at the hospital.
Yeah. As you guys know, Jensen he was born with some complications that affected his esophagus, made it harder for him to swallow compared to most of us, and so that kind of preludes the story where we're very careful with what and how often we feed him, and the size of pieces and everything. So we're very careful with that. Yeah. Please understand.
He's been in feeding therapy since he was 6 months old.
Yeah.
Because we know that his esophagus doesn't work right.
We feed him through a tube, for crying out loud.
Yeah,
we're very careful with what we feed him.
Yeah.
Sometimes Cosette will, or one of the girls, any of the kids really. This is a hazard for anybody. Will grab something out of the fridge, set it down, get distracted, walk away, and in this case, Jensen just so happened to find it. And it was just a stick of Colby Jack cheese. Someone came to visit real quick, and they had just taken off. I was putting a few things away, and one of the girls said something to me, and I looked, and I don't even remember which one of them that it was, but I looked over, and I think I addressed it, but then I looked over to the right and saw Jensen standing there walking up to me holding this stick of cheese, but I could clearly see that he was choking. And so, just like any parent, I grabbed him as quick as I could, turned him upside down. I put his
did the backpack.
So you do the backpack, put his chest on the palm of your hand, and but this time I lit it, because normally I don't panic. Normally, Bree's a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm usually when it comes to feeding, I'm the one that's like, you're giving him
she's a little more
bites, slow down.
Careful, if you will, than I am, and
not that you give him big bites, but I'm definitely the more paranoid
I'm just not
one.
As worried per se. And so, but this time when I saw it, I pretty much freaked out. So I tipped him upside down as far as I could, and I just started patting him on the back. And when I saw that wasn't doing anything, because that usually is what does it. It's cheese. Cheese is like Play-Doh, especially when it's wet, and it's stuck in the back of his throat. That sucker wasn't moving. And so as I saw him already starting to turn blue, there's never that perfect moment where to call 911. But it was clear to me, first of all, I'm alone. Bree's not here.
Yeah, I was gone.
She was visiting a friend real quick,
and Brielle was at dance, and Jensen and the girls and Bodie were home.
Yeah, which that's another story in and of itself. But in my mind, I called 911, and that was at 6:38 p.m. So Jensen was already choking before 6:38. And he was gasping, but he really wasn't getting any oxygen to his lungs. And so a lot of everything that happened in between the call me getting the cheese out, I actually never got it out. I'll get there. And the ambulance getting to the house was about 5 minutes. When I looked on my phone later that night, I realized I called at 6:38 p.m. and my phone told me it was a 5-minute call. So he's already turning blue. She gets on the phone, asks the address. It's on speakerphone far away. I'm trying to yell.
Dispatcher.
Yeah, the 911 dispatcher. I'm trying to yell the address to her while at the same time I'm watching my son basically panicking, trying to figure out. Like, guys, I've done CPR. Like, we've learned CPR 3 times.
3 times. Because we knew that, we have taken everything about his complications and his defects seriously.
Very seriously.
And, before we left the hospital, we practiced CPR. When we got home, we practiced CPR. We taught it to our kids.
Guys, my mom put on a seminar in my insurance agency's office for the whole city. We put it on the radio, everything. Guess how many people came?
And guess who it was?
Me. And we even made a joke at the end, like, hey, who knows, maybe this will save one of our kids' lives. It was no joke. I'm on the phone with her. Like I said, a lot of that was a bit of a blur. Basically what I remember is she told me to do the Heimlich. That was the first thing that she told me to do, because he was still there. He was still coherent, but he was fading. He was fading fast. But I did it kind of funny, being that he was a baby. I did kind of the same thing.
Because usually I didn't even know they told
still
you to
do
do the
that, because
Heimlich
they
on a
didn't tell us
baby.
that in our CPR training.
So she told you to do the Heimlich.
She told me to do the Heimlich maneuver.
Yeah, because in the CPR training, there's also a choking portion of that, but they always just tell you to do back pats, and what do you do when back pats don't work?
So I put the palm of my hand against his chest, bring his back against mine, and I tipped him upside down as far as I could. I bent over as far as I could, and just with the palm of my hand was pulling up against him, just hoping, obviously, that would do anything at all.
So what was his body like
at that point? He's getting stiff, and the hardest part, I've told this story a few times now with friends and family that have asked over the last few days, and I feel like I can finally tell it without bawling through the whole thing. But as I was doing that, he actually somehow he cried out a little bit, but then he couldn't breathe back in.
So it got lodged worse?
I don't know. He cried out probably 2, maybe 3 times, a tiny bit, and then tried to breathe back in, and he couldn't. And to turn him over and see his eyes, as big as they were and as blue as his face was hands down the scariest thing that I've seen in my entire life. I've seen him do these big blue spells before, and I've had to blow air into his lungs before, but that was the next thing she told me to do, is as he passed out in my arms, he just completely faded and passed out. I laid him down on the ground, and she told me to do a breath. And as I did, he's laying down on the floor in front of me, and I'm kneeling to the left of him. And mind you, I don't know anybody is in the room. Like, as far as I'm concerned, it's just him and me. And I lay him down, and I do a breath into his mouth, and I completely forget to cover his nose. That's one thing I do remember, that some of the air and stuff that was in his mouth came up and out of his nose, and I was frustrated with myself at that point too, and I tilted his head back, because I forgot to do that too. Tilted his head back, lifted his chin up, plugged his nose, did another breath, and nothing. I got absolutely nothing down in there. So at this point, what they teach us to do is to go straight to chest compressions until the ambulance gets there. And I remember yelling at the phone, because I can't hear her very well over everything, the commotion going on. And I remember asking her twice. I said, did you send the amp? Did you call them? And she didn't hear me, because she was talking back at me too. And I said, did you call them? Like, I needed to just know
that help was coming. Because you're on your own, alone, and you're thinking, like, I need help.
Yep. And that was easily, like, imagine your baby in the palm of your hands passing out, and as far as you know, like what you see in the movies, is as real as that was in that moment. He was gone. As far as I was concerned, as far as I knew, my baby had just died. And so I'm on my own doing everything that I can. I go to the chest compressions, and even that's a little bit of a blur, because some of them I did on his back, and some things I did, I don't remember if she told me to or not. So some of the chest compressions I did while I was on his back, some of them I stood back up to try to kind of do the Heimlich and chest compression. He's such a small baby. My hand is so big on his chest that I was just hoping that would still compress his lungs enough and keep his heart going enough to... Anyway, as a last resort, I remember I thought I did this on my own, but I laid him back down and stuck my finger in his mouth and tried to get the cheese out. I did another breath and I felt a tiny bit of air go back into his lungs. And so at this point, like, I tried to get it out, but I couldn't. So at this point, as a last resort, I just shoved my finger as far down his throat as I could to just push this obstruction down.
So you got a little bit of air.
I got a little bit of air into his lungs.
So you tried to swipe. Then you gave him air and you felt a little bit.
A tiny bit.
So then you thought, I'm going to try that again.
I thought I'm going to try this again because something just worked.
Okay.
Something just worked. So I went back down into his
he's
trachea
completely still
and imagine him, he's completely unconscious. Like, when I stick my finger down in his mouth and in his throat, I'm also kind of, it's like the fastest, slowest moment of your life. I'm also thinking this is just a baby. He has the tiniest little mouth, the tiniest little throat, and they're just so delicate. And I shoved it down as far as I could, went and did another breath, and that was just enough. It was just enough that with my left hand, I could feel his chest rise. I felt those sacs of air.
But when you did that last swipe and then did you feel the cheese move on the last swipe?
Yeah, I mean, it's cheese, so it's not like a big ball of meat. It's like you just move a tiny bit of it, and it's like Play-Doh, so it just kind of scrapes off the top, or moved it just enough to the side, because I'm pulling it from the left to the right. And I felt like it created just enough air passage that a little bit went in. But in this case, and I know they actually tell you, you're usually not supposed to do that.
Well, at that point, what else are you supposed to do?
I couldn't get it out, so I thought, it's going to go down. And I pushed as hard and far as I could, and
then you laid him down for another breath. He
was laying down, yeah, and I gave him another breath, and I could feel his lungs fill with air. And that was the first time in that situation that I felt any hope whatsoever that I'm not going to have to tell Bree how my son died. And after everything that he's been through, for that to be the end, it was not the last chapter that I was willing to. And so I breathed, I gave him another rescue breath again. And then he started coughing. At one point he threw up. I don't know when or where or how it got all over my shirt. There's a lot that I didn't remember, but it really doesn't matter. The clip that you guys will see that it opens up with is a friend of mine came over, heard the commotion. By then,
well, they saw that ambulance.
So by now, I hear, after I get him breathing again, I hear the ambulance coming down the road. And he's breathing on his own, but it's very forced. And he's like, he's still got a lot of cheese, a lot of spit, saliva, whatever is still in his throat and in his lungs. And they walk in. This is when my friend starts recording something, and I had apparently, he said, and I didn't know this till later, but he said that once the paramedics came in and I handed Jensen to them, I just collapsed to the floor and didn't get up for a few seconds. I don't remember that. But I remember, and you'll see in the clip where the paramedic is talking to me, and I'm clearly in shock. I'm not really hearing, I say yes, but I'm not really hearing what he's saying, because all I see is my son still grasping for air, and I'm wanting him to not talk to me. I'm wanting to fix it right there. Mm-hmm. I'm wanting to say, let's forget about the hospital and let's fix this right here, because he's still, you'll hear him.
So obviously with what happened, we take you to the hospital. So we would like to probably get going with that. You okay with us transporting you in?
We got your kids, bud. Derek, we have your kids. You're good.
He's still really struggling.
He's still really struggling to breathe. So at that was a new moment where I'm thinking, okay, we're not out of the woods yet. This is still rough. Apparently, the next night when we were talking to Bodie, we just wanted to innocently ask him,
what are you thinking about?
Well, knowing that the kids were there, so like I said, Bodhi and the little girls were there, and he didn't really know where they were when all the commotion was happening, and so, you know, like what vantage point they had during this. And so the next night, you know, we said, did you see what was going on? Where were you?
That's what blew my mind with his answers. He heard me try to tell my phone to call 911, and that didn't work. And so I had to do it myself.
So he came.
So he was there in the beginning, and then he heard the 911 dispatcher tell me to stick my finger in his throat and see if I could feel anything. And I don't remember that. I don't remember her telling me to do that at all, which is fine in some aspects. Like, one, it's fine because the thing that was hard for me about that is that I didn't realize how far like out I was, as far as
you didn't even know
that. I was gone. I was just doing, you know, and I didn't remember everything as far as our CPR classes, and I was just trying to save my son. And it's funny what you do and don't hear, but it also hurts me inside that Bodhi had to see all that, because like as traumatized as I am, and Bree has been for the last, since he was born and since his incident last year, my 7-year-old son just watched his little brother die, as far as he knew. And the other thing that hurts is
and the girls were.
Is that Emmy, what did Emmy tell you?
She just said, I talked to her on the phone later that night, and I said, what happened, Ember? And she said, JJ ate some cheese and then he closed his eyes.
All I remember is being proud of Bodhi, because I remember looking up as the paramedics were coming, and I remember seeing Bodhi saying, no, girls, come outside. Like he was taking the girls out the front door. And I was like, good boy, you know, because...
But you hadn't thought of everything that had happened before that.
No. Well, I didn't know that he was there. He had to have been 2 feet away from me, and I had no idea he was there, which just tells you your mind.
You were completely zoned in.
I hope I was.
Of course you were.
I mean, I was, but I just hope I did everything the right way that you're supposed to, and he's alive, so that's all that matters.
I'm trying to figure out what's upsetting about that to you, because you're worried that you
I just
weren't
want to
doing
hear
what
that.
you were supposed
I want
to
to
be
go
doing,
back and,
or because you
because you know how sometimes when you panic,
you were just focused. I'm sure you were just focused. It's not like there was a minute that you weren't working on him.
No, there's not. Which at that point.
So I think that you're dealing with some guilt, but I think that you were doing everything you could possibly
part of the guilt.
think
Part of the guilt was him having that cheese in the first place. Like him for not knowing that he was already choking. And I know you can't control every second of every day, but the part of the guilt is the what if. Like, what if he was in the other room? And we've already talked about this, so I'm not going to cry about it. Part of the guilt is like the what if. What if he was in another room and I was looking on Instagram? Yeah. Jordan Page has talked about that too. Like, her son almost drowned because of we as parents just need to be. That was a learning lesson for me, that situation could have been 1,000 times worse. Like, we could have buried our son this weekend.
But we didn't.
And we didn't. And so that's why I've been good. Like, we basically cried for 2 days straight. Hence our fast from social media. Thank you guys so much for your posts.
We were
your
definitely
comments,
just a mess.
Your messages, your prayers, your love, support. But we had to just kind of shut things down those couple days, and we had to feel, you know, and process everything and go through it. Coming back to the end of the story, I called at 6:38. It was a 5-minute call. She did not hang up the phone. The dispatcher did not hang up the phone until she knew that the paramedics were in the house. That was 5 minutes. You do the math. Jensen was already not breathing, but just before 6:38, He was not breathing for about 3 minutes.
Well,
at least.
But he wasn't getting good air for any of those minutes.
Yeah, I don't know how long he was passed out. I want to get that call if there's any way, because I want to know how long he was gone. Like, I'm holding him in my arms and he's gone. I watch his eyes. I watch him turn blue. I feel his body slowly fade away. That was the scariest. I've said it twice now, but that was hands down the scariest moment of my life. You know, we are so blessed because he's here and
he's good and fine. And it's almost like a weird disconnect in our brains.
Let him go. Jay, Jensen.
I mean, obviously we're so thankful that he's fine, but it's like you go through these things that are just like earth shattering. Like you feel like your world is crumbling. And then somehow, so your mind's processing these things, and then you wake up the next day and it's fine.
You get back to life.
No, he's fine, but we're still dealing with those really real emotions and fears, and it's tricky that way for sure. Yeah. And even he called me.
Jeez.
And he said, all he said was, Jensen's okay. He's okay. That's the first thing he said. But you need to go to the hospital because I just had to do CPR. And then I heard the sirens.
So I'm in the ambulance.
So I'm thinking, well, he's not okay. He's in an ambulance. You know, like you wouldn't be in an ambulance if you were, okay. So my friend just grabbed me, and I was crying, of course, hysterically, and drove me to the hospital. And, as soon as I got there, so I get there probably 30 minutes after this has all happened, by the time the ambulance came and took him, and then by the time I get to the hospital, and he was still struggling to breathe.
Yeah, he was. Let's hear it.
He was struggling. He was listless and lethargic. He wouldn't, I would have thought when he saw me, he would have been like, oh good, my mom's here. But he wouldn't even look at me. It wasn't that he wouldn't look at me. It was that he didn't see me.
You could be in his line of sight.
And he wouldn't even move his eyes. He just was staring off into space. And his arms were limp, his whole body was limp, he couldn't hold his head, he couldn't sit up. And then so you're starting to be like, okay, well, he's not acting normal. How long did he not have oxygen for? Was it too long? Do we have some brain damage going on because of lack of oxygen?
And these are questions that they could only answer by transporting us to Primary Children's
Hospital.
Hospital.
And plus they said they need to make sure he needed to get his esophagus checked because he could not have any food until we knew that his airway was clear, because if we tried to give him something else and there's something else in there, obviously he's going to choke again. The other thing they said was they needed to check his lungs, because he could have
I was worried that I forced
aspirated, or he could have pushed the cheese into his lungs, which I never even knew you could get food. I knew you could get water in your lungs, but I didn't even know food was possible. So they were like, we might have to send a scope into his lungs and try to find something. So they're like, you have to go to primaries, which we were glad, because the Children's Hospital and our relationship with our doctors there, we're like, that's fine. So they put us in the ambulance, and we start to have clips around this time, so this might be a little bit of a repeat, but they put me in the ambulance, and he drives.
I'll be there soon. I'll hurry.
on the ambulance drive, he fell asleep, like right away at the very beginning.
I'm sure he was exhausted.
And remember, at this point, he had not acted like himself. One time, he was just, like I said, just out of it. And then he woke up about 20 minutes before we got to primaries, and he was making sounds, and he was kicking his legs, and he was looking around, and I was like, okay, he's gonna be okay. That was a huge relief that he started showing those signs of normalcy. And then we got to the hospital, and they check him out, and you know, they do they run tests on him, and we're at primaries. We just got off the ambulance, and we are waiting for Derek to get here and for the doctors to come in. I'm actually feeling good right now because he is perking up. I was really worried earlier because he was like super lethargic and limp, but now he's like looking around, he's making some sounds and seeming interested, which is good, because you know, when you go without oxygen, you worry about their brains. Mom. But see, Mom. Those little sounds mean a lot.
And we did find out that he's got some. We do need to slow down with the feeding. We do need to do some things differently. This is a little bit different from that. All that showed us is that he still does not eat, chew, or swallow the way that he's supposed to.
Which we knew, and it was just a reminder.
Yeah.
And you guys will see all that in the other footage because we were filming at this point.
Okay, bud, let's do some tests.
Flavoring.
More esophograms.
Get the tip of it in the menu.
Yeah.
Right before it goes in.
Yeah.
Oh, he's doing so good. You did it, bud. It's all done.
One thing down.
Get a new friend out of it.
The scariest part about all this for me is that, you know, this is not the first time that we've thought we were losing our child. We've had multiple incidences of this, and it's terrible. But what feels even more terrible to me is that I don't feel confident that this won't happen again. I don't know how to there's no way I could say, I guarantee. And I know there's no guarantees with any of our kids. Things can happen at any time, but I don't feel like we couldn't be in this situation again because there's no quick fix. It's literally like,
he has to grow out of it.
Keep doing therapy. He'll be better when he's 3 or 4. So I'm like, so what? We still have 2 years of this terror that this could happen. Like, it's an awful feeling to be like, I might not be able to protect my kid, and to have the reality of it. I don't know.
We just can't buy string cheese.
String cheese is like his favorite food. And
I mean, that's the gist. That's the gist of the story. Those are the cliff notes. Sorry, we don't mean to drag this out or you know, make it more dramatic than it needs to be. It's just it was just a hard situation.
Yeah.
I still can't explain it to its full, just the actual feelings when you're going through that situation. Like, there's no possible way to describe how many thoughts, fears, and just how many things are going through your head in that moment.
Yeah.
But I guess the takeaway from it, because we are so sorry for some of our friends and some of you, and
that have gone
so
through,
many people
lost their children or have terrible trials.
If we haven't, we will go through something, and that's life. And I would say the biggest, most important thing to take away is just to love your people, you know, and
enjoy the time you have.
Not take time for granted.
Live with intent.
Absolutely. Live with intent and just be present in the moment. I mean, we're so thankful for some of the friends and the family, and for some of you that have reached out, and some that have gone through things that didn't have the same happy ending, and that just breaks my heart.
Yeah,
And
I think in some ways, you know, I didn't lose our child, but I feel like we've come to that point so many times.
we felt it.
That I don't want to say I can understand your heartache,
No.
because I don't.
No.
But I really understand like the fear, and I feel like it almost makes my heart ache for you more,
Yeah.
because I couldn't picture that.
If you're not already or haven't done any trainings on CPR,
Definitely.
please do. Find a local area near you.
It has saved our child's life multiple times.
Yeah.
I mean, he's received the full-blown CPR twice, but he's had rescue breaths
A few times.
as well, and that's all part of the CPR course. And if you're not saving your own child, like when I was in the situation with Jensen, so Derek did it on Jensen, obviously, but when I was in this situation, I didn't actually deliver the CPR, somebody else did. And I think a lot of times we are going to be the ones that help somebody else. It may not be someone in your family, but you might be able to help a stranger and change their life,
Step up.
just like strangers changed ours. I have so many thoughts on it. It's not even just like do it every year, like, or 2 years, like your job says. Like, I don't know. Everyone just needs to stay up on it and refresh their memories, because in the moment, even though Derek said we've refreshed 3 times, he was still like, okay, what do I do?
Panic sets in and it takes over. But if I
But
feel
that's
like
not reason enough to not step in, though. Being like, I haven't done my CPR license for a year. I'm not going to say I know how to do
never
CPR.
assume somebody else is going to do it, or somebody else would do it better, or whatever. Just anything is better than nothing.
Yeah. And they told us that with oxygen to people's brains and stuff. They're like, even poor oxygen is like, you do your best until somebody more equipped can get there.
Yeah. Well, dude, we got through it.
That was better than
Normally
I thought
in
it
this
was gonna
story, it's like crying through the entire thing, but
be. I think
there's
we've
so
had a
much
few
gratitude.
more days to process, and anyway.
We're so thankful. We're just so thankful. We
Thank
love you guys.
Yeah. Thanks for everything. Stick with us while we figure this out and process it, and we're just taking it day by day, but we're thankful to have you guys here and support us and allow us to be part of your lives.
Thanks, guys.